I'm never using him again." Dave Roberts didn't say that out of anger alone. He said it after watching one play unravel everything the Dodgers had built in that inning. One passed ball. One moment of lost focus. And Austin Rushing had turned a winnable situation into something that felt, at least for a few seconds, completely out of control. But the story didn't end at the passed ball. It continued in the dugout. It continued in the locker room. It continued at the press conference, where Rushing sat in front of a microphone with the expression of a man who had survived something, but wasn't entirely sure what. This was not a night to take lightly. The Dodgers had entered the game with momentum on their side. They had won the series opener. The energy inside Dodger Stadium felt like the kind that builds slowly and then refuses to leave. Roki Sasaki was on the mound, sharp and precise in the early innings, doing exactly what the Dodgers needed from their young ace. The defense behind him had been clean. The rhythm of the game had a certain quiet confidence to it. Then came the inning that changed everything. A runner reached second. The pitch came in, a breaking ball that moved just enough to clip the inside corner of Rushing's glove. The ball got away. The runner moved. And suddenly, the scoreboard told a different story than the one the Dodgers had been writing. It was the kind of mistake that happens in baseball. Anyone who has watched enough games knows that. Catchers drop pitches. It is part of the sport. But this moment felt heavier than most, because Sasaki was in his rhythm, because the game was in a critical phase, and because the runner that scored changed the entire complexion of what came next. Roberts watched it from the dugout. His expression didn't break. It rarely does. But the decision had already formed in his mind before the inning was over. Sasaki, however, was not as composed. He stood on the mound for a moment longer than usual after the play. The outward signs were subtle, a glance down at the rubber, a jaw that tightened just slightly. But anyone paying attention could see it. This was not the calm, methodical Sasaki who had dominated hitters through 4 innings. This was a pitcher who felt that something had been taken from him. Not by the opposing lineup. By the man crouching behind home plate. After the inning ended, as the Dodgers walked back toward the dugout, Sasaki made his way directly to Rushing. The exchange was brief. It was not a conversation. It was not an encouragement. Those who witnessed it described it as Sasaki saying, in terms that left little room for interpretation, that a passed ball in that situation was simply not acceptable. Rushing said nothing in return. He absorbed it. He sat down. And the weight of that moment stayed on his shoulders for the rest of the evening. Then Ohtani intervened. It did not happen loudly. It did not happen in a way that drew the cameras or made the highlight packages. It happened in the quiet corner of the dugout, where 2 men sat close enough to talk without anyone else hearing. Shohei Ohtani sat down next to Austin Rushing. He didn't open with encouragement. He didn't immediately try to reverse what Rushing was feeling. He just sat there for a moment, in the way that only certain people know how to sit with someone who is struggling, before speaking. Those who observed it from a distance described it as a short exchange. A few minutes at most. Ohtani spoke. Rushing listened. At one point, Rushing looked up. At another, there was something that resembled a nod. No one could hear the exact words. But when Rushing returned to his catching position in the following inning, something had shifted. His posture was different. The slump that had settled into his shoulders was still there, but it sat differently now, like a weight being carried rather than a weight that was crushing. That is the thing about Ohtani that rarely makes the highlight reels. It isn't just what he does on the field. It is what he understands about the human being standing beside him. After the game, Roberts was direct. He stood at the podium with the look of a manager who had made decisions he wasn't entirely pleased with but fully intended to stand behind. A reporter asked about Rushing's role going forward. Roberts didn't hesitate. Right now, I don't see him in the starting lineup. The room absorbed that. Another reporter followed immediately. Is this a permanent decision? Roberts folded his hands on the podium. He glanced slightly to the left, the way he does when he's choosing his words with care rather than speaking from reflex. I don't use the word permanent lightly. What I'll say is that we need to look at this closely. A play like that in a moment like that, that's not something you move past without taking a hard look at what happened and why. Someone asked about the equipment. There had been a report, circulating in the press area before the conference began, that Roberts had personally confiscated Rushing's catching gear after the game, a symbolic act that underlined just how serious the manager considered the moment. Roberts didn't deny it. I wanted him to understand the weight of what happened, he said. Not to punish him. To make sure the lesson didn't disappear by morning. The room grew quiet. It wasn't the words themselves that landed so heavily. It was the way Roberts said them. With the tone of a man who had made a painful decision not out of frustration, but out of the belief that there are moments in a season that define what a team is willing to tolerate, and what they are not. Rushing entered the press conference room 15 minutes after Roberts had left it. He sat down. He adjusted the microphone. He looked directly at the reporters without flinching. A reporter asked him about the passed ball. I let the team down, he said. I let Roki down. There's nothing else to say about the play itself. It happened. It shouldn't have. Another reporter asked about Sasaki's reaction on the field. Rushing paused. His jaw moved slightly before the words came. He was frustrated. He had every right to be. When you're pitching the way he was pitching, and something like that happens behind you, I would have been frustrated too. A third reporter asked about Ohtani's conversation in the dugout. For the first time since sitting down, Rushing's expression shifted. It didn't break into anything soft or emotional. But something behind his eyes changed. Shohei is. He stopped. Gathered himself. He said something to me that I needed to hear. I'm not going to share what it was, because it was between us. But it was the right thing. It was exactly the right thing. The room was quiet for a moment. Someone asked if he felt blindsided by Roberts' decision to remove him from the lineup. No, Rushing said. I understand it. If I were in that position, I'd probably make the same call. He paused again. That doesn't make it easier. But I understand it. There are games in a long season that feel like crossroads. Not because of the final score. Not because of the standings. But because of what they reveal about the people inside the uniforms, how they respond to failure, how they treat one another in the difficult moments, and what they decide matters when the scoreboard has already delivered its verdict. This was one of those games. The Dodgers lost. The passed ball was a factor. Sasaki's frustration was real and visible. Roberts' decision was firm and immediate. And in the middle of all of it, Shohei Ohtani sat down next to a young catcher in the corner of a dugout and said something that no microphone caught, something that no camera recorded, something that made Austin Rushing look up and nod. That moment won't appear in any box score. It won't show up in the WAR calculations or the pitch tracking data or the defensive metrics that analysts will use to evaluate this roster through the summer and into October. But it happened. And the people who were there saw it. After the press conference, a veteran reporter who had covered the Dodgers for more than a decade stood in the hallway outside the media room and said something that stuck. I've seen managers bench players for a passed ball before. I've seen pitchers go after their catchers in a dugout. None of that is new. He paused. But I've never seen the best player on the team, maybe the best player in baseball, just quietly sit down next to a kid who was falling apart and stay there until he wasn't. He shook his head slightly. That's not in any manual. That's just who he is. The season continues. Rushing will work. He will catch bullpen sessions and he will study video and he will wait for whatever opportunity the next week or the next month decides to offer him. Roberts will make decisions. Some will be right. Some will be difficult. All of them will be made with the same calculation: what gives this team the best chance to win in October? Sasaki will take the mound again. He will be precise and dangerous and focused, the way he almost always is, because that is what he does when the lights are brightest. And Ohtani will do what Ohtani does: hit baseballs an unreasonable distance, retire hitters with pitches that move in ways that seem to defy what baseballs are supposed to do, and occasionally sit down next to a struggling teammate in the corner of a dugout. Quietly. Without cameras. Without credit. Just because it was the right thing to do.